What is a cult, but doesn't feel like a cult? Agree, though it didn't seem like a cult in high school. It was fun times, even when we played like absolute dogshit. University, though, I was having to blow off classes to go to impromptu practices, went an entire semester without a single day off from hours of practice. If I was absent or late to a single practice I had to repay my entire scholarship, and marching band was only worth one semester hour. With all the random ass practices, I was easily putting in 40 hours a week to marching band. Ended up failing that semester with the 1.6 grade point because I had to skip so many of my non-band classes to do band things. My friend's girlfriend is always pushing jewelry sales on Facebook. You can tell she drank the MLM Kool-Aid a while back. Here's the thing though, I make jewelry as a hobby. Just by looking at her FB pics and vids I can tell that her jewelry is extremely cheap and shoddy. Not even good enough to be costume jewelry. I have yet to say a single thing to her or her BF about this. I just mute her whenever one of her hour-long unpacking vids pops up in my feed. Honestly, cults don't feel like cults to those in them. Everything is set up to make it all feel normal. It works particularly well because cults prey upon those who are lonely and searching for a sense of belonging. Usually there's some religious aspect and some nebulous threat to fight against. It's designed to make people involved feel safe, like they're doing good, and like they'd be nothing without the cult. The cult at Jonestown, People's Temple, started as a church that was trying to help people of color in Indiana. It was primarily elderly people at the start of it all, people who were alone, people who wanted to do good, so they gave everything they had for the cause. As it grew, more varied people came into the picture, but it started as a church trying to help people with a predatory leader. The cult at Jonestown, People's Temple, started as a church that was trying to help people of color in Indiana. It was primarily elderly people at the start of it all, people who were alone, people who wanted to do good, so they gave everything they had for the cause. As it grew, more varied people came into the picture, but it started as a church trying to help people with a predatory leader. I read the book The Road to Jonestown, and I very specifically remember thinking that I would have been entirely on board with joining the original church. It was completely up my alley. It was focused on actually going into the community and doing good works, like feeding the poor etc. rather than focusing on sit-down services. I do a lot of volunteer work in general, and would absolutely be the type of person who would get wrapped up in this at that stage. Cults are like abusive relationships. If someone punched you in the face on the first date, you'd never see them again. If you showed up at a meeting and it was obviously a cult, you'd never go back. It's slow indoctrination from a reasonable starting point. Everyone thinks they would see it coming. If a cult were to try to recruit them, they almost never do. Sure, they may recognize and evade one or two cults, but then number 3 comes along, which isn't so obvious to them. And it's down the rabbit hole from there. Be very careful with your hubris, people. Without specific training, you definitely won't recognize all the cults coming for you. You are vulnerable. When your family is trying to homestead up and become a commune and go off the grid, that's when you need to be wary. Not because it's malicious, but because there's always a labor shortage. Important shit isn't getting done and so everyone is super inconvenienced. People aren't eating, are getting infections, aren't sleeping enough and everyone gets grabby, which provokes all the infighting. Some communes are successful, but most are not, and all are a lot of hard work at least for a decade or so. Then there's the problem with the upper administration, including the charismatic leaders. They're often swimming in lucre and may not be used to being fabulously rich. That stuff goes to one's head fast, especially once one learns about drugs. Cocaine, heroin and morphine are all popular. Hitler's inner circle were hooked on coke and morphine. The downfall of a lot of ministers' sensibilities happens with the drugs, combined with the sex. Yes, they're all also sexy as rock stars, what with being rich and popular and loved by huge crowds. And whenever young hottie throws themselves at you, it's a struggle just to bang in moderation, let alone stay chaste. A sense of entitlement follows. which is how you get situations like Jessica Hahn, or that point where Jim Jones or David Koresh decided to nullify all the marriages in the ministry so they could respectively prey on the taken women. Also, this is the first place the FBI looks for child sexual abuse when they're looking to justify intervening, as not all of those groupies are over 18. Speaking of which, federal law enforcement are terrified of cults, less so of sex, segregated religious groups that are officially part of a larger ministry, often suffering from the same kinds of problems. After Jonestown ambushed and killed Leo Ryan and had their mass suicide, that scare led to the Waco siege, and the FBI and ATF go after a lot of NRMs, most of whom are pretty harmless. It doesn't help that major evangelist figures have a lot of influence in Washington, and can send police to harass whoever they want. Edit. Second pass for clarity. Workplaces that push the "we're family" attitude are doing it solely to create a sense of obligation to the company while stifling the idea of being fairly compensated, because you're just supposed to help out family without asking for anything in return. Never mind that they'll drop you like a sack of bricks if it suits them, because they know the "we're family" thing is just a ruse to get you to sacrifice yourself for them, for basically nothing. Had a Jeep. I got one because I always liked how they looked. As a single man at the time, it did great things for my dating life. It was awesome, for about a year. Then you realize just how unawesome they are. I got 12 miles per gallon. On a good day, the roof leaked. If it rained, my left arm was going to get wet, and any maintenance or repairs that needed doing to it were going to set you back quite a bit, financially, unless you had the time, equipment and know how to do it yourself. Top this off with the fact that even though they look large, they have very little room inside. After it developed an engine tick that I found was common and quite expensive to repair if it wasn't under warranty, I traded it in on something else. Guy I went to high school is in the Marys and was home on leave. I ran into him at the strip club randomly. It was my birthday and another friend coincidentally was having a bachelor party at the strip club. He was with their party. They invite me and my wife to join the party. I'm trying to enjoy some titties with my wife and he won't stop talking about being in the Marines, mostly how he can kill without consequences. Fun fact about this dude, he was a state trooper before the Marines. He got fired from being a street for multiple reasons. I mean, you can't really be in the military seriously without drinking the Kool-Aid. The whole point of the military is to mold you into someone who can give orders that may result in you or others dying, but you'll do it anyway because of your loyalty to the cause, aka your military and your country. That's literally the definition of cult fanaticism. The fact that it's federally funded and free to join doesn't make it feel like a cult though until you're already a year or more in. Watching the Amazon series on LuLaRoe made me realize humans just really like being a part of a tribe, don't we? It's ingrained into our animal brains still. Herd animals through and through. Every convention looked just like a church, a Comic-Con, a concert, etc. We want to look up to someone and be someone to look up to. It's always good to be a part of something and a community. It makes us feel safe. But I guess the line is drawn when you start surrounding yourself with just that one tribe. I was in a single moms group for a few weeks until I realized it was just a man-hating club. Those women were moms and only moms, which can be depressing. There's more to life than raising kids. That's how you get midlife crisis and divorces, because when the kids leave, now what? Remember, you gotta put the oxygen mask on yourself before anyone else. I got tricked into going to one of their meetings by a friend. Was supposed to be like a girls' seminar. I had actually just left a religious cult, ICOG, and it had the exact same vibe, except based around Amway. Closed but seemingly open and friendly but aggressive social circle, motivational sounding, use of tons of buzzwords, hiding information, put in a lot of money for little gain. I had no idea how deep MLMs went to keep you locked in. My wife really wanted a Peloton and COVID, and no gym memberships led us down that road. The workouts are good, but holy fuck, 90% of the instructors absolutely feel like they are trying to get you to join a cult or MLM scheme or something. They just have that vibe. They just use insincerity, as if everything they say is scripted and written by some corporate algorithm to appeal to millennials. Or they throw in some weird dumb shit that feels like they skimmed through a BuzzFeed article and tried to talk about it during the workout, and you end up spending 3 minutes listening to some weird recap of the article in the middle of your workout. They always come off as a "hello, fellow kids, millennials" moment. There was one instructor talking about how they were such an 80s/90s kid and goes on about, "Does anyone else remember that movie with David Bowie with the pants and it was all weird? That was my favorite movie. I have no idea what it's called, but I watch it all the time. It's my favorite ever." This is an actual example. They were talking about The Labyrinth, but apparently couldn't remember the title or literally anything about the movie, but still managed to talk for a few minutes about it for no reason. Where did Stan come from? I've heard this term a few times and feel like it came out of nowhere. Searching tells me it was added to Merriam-Webster in 2017, but I haven't started hearing it until now. All I can think of is the N-word in Muslim countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Edit. Apparently it comes from an Eminem song, but that song came out in 2000. I never heard the term throughout high school and college. What's with the resurgence? I mean, that's just how language evolves, right? Loads of words that started with one intention eventually take on another. It's not particularly rare for a word with a negative connotation to take on a positive one, often as a reaction to the original meaning, or rebellion against it. See bad, sick, etc. With Stan, if I had to guess, I'd imagine it started getting used ironically or self-deprecatingly by superfans, and then that got taken up until it just unironically has the new meaning. It does feel a bit weird, being of an age to remember the Troop Maker, especially as I missed its original usage, but I guess that's an artifact of my age relative to the rise of the internet. There's always going to be people who use words' new meaning while too young to remember the original. Maybe it's happening faster. Maybe I'm just aging. Macron __/Macron. I'm a jeweler, goldsmith, and every once in a while, a client wants to know the properties of a particular stone. You don't want to tell the person who is paying you good money that their beliefs are bullshit. So I tend to talk about the hardness and durability of the stones, what minerals cause the color, those kinds of properties, and pretend I thought that's what they meant. Can't it be enough that they're marvels of nature, take thousands of years to form, and some happen to be incredible conductors of electricity? That's pretty magical already. Story time. Few years ago I found myself in a bit of a tourist trap rock shop. Now, I love me a good rock. Always have. I don't judge when people pick up a random stone and are like, "Oh man, this looks cool." I get it. So I'm snooping around, giving the side eye to this 7-tall amethyst geode, trying to figure out if my girlfriend would notice me packing it in the trunk, when this woman turns to her husband and states, "Oh, I think I need a few more crystals for my back. It's been hurting something fierce lately, and I don't think the ones I have are cutting it anymore." Sure enough, woman buys a glob of quartz about the size of a normal human brain and walks out the door talking about how her back feels better already. I discovered Dream way early in his career, before anyone really knew who he was. When he started experiencing massive exponential growth of followers about a year and a half ago now, I was really happy for him. But my god, the fans are just fucking terrible. It's beyond obsessive. It's just got worse and worse. I moved away from all that nonsense the moment it manifested, but I still keep an eye on it. I'm far too old to get dragged into that bullshit. It really does feel like cult. If Dream told them to jump off a cliff, a handful of them would actually do it, I'm sure. I went to Comic-Con in August, and my friends and I had theorized what fandoms we would see the most. I didn't really realize that a majority of people there were about 11-14, and that 11-14-year-olds don't care about the same things I do. Only Dream SMP. I saw so many Dream cosplayers and I blew my fucking mind at how young they were and just the sheer number of them. On a side note, I also saw a young girl, around 11-13, dresses as Yandere-chan, which made me chuckle. That's how old I was when the game started development. I'm 19 now. They would say it's not a religion, just a different way of thinking. My ex-girlfriend and her whole family are Scientologists, and I lived with her and her dad for a while down in Clearwater, the capital of Scientology. That is until her dad had to sell my ex's childhood home because he was in so much debt from buying new Scientology modules. The newest one he had bought at the time was called Superpowers and supposedly taught you how to do a long list of extraordinary abilities, such as being able to deter the salt content of your blood just through concentration in your mind. He had all L. Ron Hubbard's books. He and his ex-wife had joined Scientology and raised their 3 girls in it, which involved homeschooling them using school books written by L. Ron Hubbard. Like any cult, they use many code words that help separate members from non-member friends or family. To be clear means you are thinking correctly, not feeling anxiety, etc. To get clear, you have to meet weekly at least with special auditors at Scientology centers who talk with you to see what is on your mind and try to fix what's troubling you. Sounds nice? Scientology doesn't believe in psychology or most medicine or anything non-natural. They are conditioning you to rely on the church to solve your problems. The highest level of Scientology is called the Sea Org. This is because Scientology originally started on a large yacht full of science fiction author L. Ron Hubbard and a bunch of crazy rich people. Then they stopped at the town of Clearwater, Florida, and Hubbard thought clear, just like in his religion, so they took over the town. They bought out businesses, every newspaper, and political offices. Anyone who resisted was forced out of business. Now they basically own the town. The flag building is their headquarters and is guarded by guards with submachine guns. Scientology's leadership actively tries to court and bring in powerful celebrities like they did with Tom Cruise, John Travolta, and many more. This gives them more power to do what they want. My ex once saw Kirstie Alley sitting on a bus bench in Clearwater. She also babysat for John Travolta's Taylor Woman, and while she was there, the actress Erika Christensen, from Swimp Fan, came over and hung out. My ex knew people who had gone to school at this fancy private school with Tom Cruise's son. They encouraged the kids to bully each other to become stronger. The craziest thing of all about Scientology is that higher members believe long ago many aliens came to Earth and died, and their ghosts haunt the Earth, causing all bad feelings. They cause things called thens, which make you feel bad. You need to go to Scientology centers to get audited using a machine that removes your thens to make you feel better. They actually believe this. I highly recommend the South Park episode Trapped in the Closet, which goes over all this in much more detail. It's hilarious, but the reality is fucked up. I personally don't follow sports at all to care about any of them, but my dad came from a Cowboys family and my mom comes from a Niners family. Anything involving my dad interacting with my mom's side of the family would get heated very quickly, as it eventually devolved into a Cowboys versus Niners thing. I'll never understand how rabid some people get over their team. Now that I think about it, it's also weird as hell that some families rally around one team so much that they become, insert team, families. I got teased to some extent in school because I came from a Cowboys family thanks to my dad being super vocal about being a Cowboys fan. We live in Niners territory. I quickly learned that mentioning my dad's favorite team is basically blasphemy around here and would just invite classmates to try to argue with me about it. I pledged a frat when I first went away to college. At first it seemed amazing. A bunch of guys from all walks of life that banded together and looked out for each other. To say nothing of the parties, booze, and hot girls. But as a pledge it began taking up more of my time to where everything else was secondary. I stopped talking to friends that weren't brothers I was in. These were my die-hard friends for life. I was closer to them than I'd be to anyone that wasn't direct family. Then my dad almost died and I had to drop out to help the family for a few years. I chose not to continue pledging as I couldn't afford it, and I did not think I would ever be back to that school. And I was right. The moment I backed out I stopped hearing from anyone in the frat, except one guy who harassed me about thousands, yes literally thousands, of dollars in additional dues and fees he felt I owed. And I have never so much as gotten a how are things from any of them, so many years later. I knew someone would say this, but according to sociology it's technically classified as an organized sect. A sect is basically an in-between of a major religion and a cult. Cults have a singular persuasive leader. JWs have a board and ranks in their system. Cults are also more far out there than is sociological norms. Sects are the same way but not at the same level of extreme. Not celebrating holidays is not as extreme as worshipping a tree goddess. For a made-up example, cults are also much smaller and typically in a certain region. JWs are too big to be an official cult and are worldwide, though still too small to be a major religion. The Amish would be another example of an organized sect.